We spent your inheritance on the kitchen renovation. You would have wasted it, Dad said. I nodded. What he didn't know, Grandpa called me the night before. And Grandpa never does anything without a lawyer present. The next morning, a car pulled up to our house and, my name is Otto, and I'm a software developer. At 32, I had the kind of life my parents like to describe as comfortable enough to help family. That phrase sounds harmless until you realize it really means your money is ours whenever we decide it is. The night my father told me they had spent my inheritance, he stood in the center of their brand new kitchen like a king presenting conquered land. The marble counters gleamed under pendant lights, soft close cabinets, brass hardware, a ridiculous farmhouse sink my mother had been posting on social media for weeks, with captions about finally building our dream space. I remember staring at the room and realizing, with a strange kind of numbness, that every polished surface around me had been paid for with betrayal. Dad folded his arms and said it like he expected gratitude. We spent your inheritance on the kitchen renovation. You would have wasted it anyway. My mother stood beside him, one hand on the island, as if blessing it. She didn't even look ashamed. If anything, she looked annoyed that I wasn't reacting properly. I nodded once. Okay, I said. That was all. Dad smirked, probably thinking he had won. He always mistook quiet for weakness. What he didn't know was that Grandpa had called me the night before, and Grandpa never did anything without a lawyer present. The next morning, a black sedan pulled up outside my parents' house, and everything they thought they had secured with stone countertops and forged signatures started collapsing before breakfast. To understand why that moment mattered, you need to understand my family. I was the dependable son, the useful one, the one who got good grades without being told, landed a stable career without handholding, and never caused public embarrassment. In most families, that would earn respect. In mine, it earned invoices. My younger sister, Lena, was 2 years younger and somehow permanently in crisis. At 29, she had already reinvented herself 5 times. Boutique candle business, yoga retreat coaching, custom pet accessories, sustainable fashion consulting, and finally, something vague she called brand storytelling. Every single failure came with a dramatic speech about not feeling supported enough. My parents adored it. She's creative, Mom would say whenever Lena burned through another savings account or borrowed money she never repaid. Dad liked to call her a free spirit, which was rich considering he had spent my entire childhood punishing me for anything less than total responsibility. When I was 15 and got a B in chemistry, he lectured me for an hour about discipline. When Lena crashed Mom's car at 19 because she was texting, Dad hugged her and said, cars can be replaced. When I bought my first used hatchback with money from tutoring and coding freelance jobs in high school, they called me practical. When Lena maxed out a credit card on a networking trip to Los Angeles, they called her ambitious. That was the family rhythm. I earned, she needed. I planned, she dreamed. I paid, she received. And every time I objected, I was told not to be selfish. By the time I became a software developer, working remote for a cybersecurity company, and earning more than anyone else in the family, the pattern had calcified into expectation. It started small. Otto, your mother's dental work is more expensive than we thought. Otto, Lena's rent is short just this once. Otto, your father's truck needs repairs. Then it became larger. Otto, we're falling behind on property taxes. Otto, Lena needs help launching her new venture. Otto, family takes care of family. I gave more than I should have. Some of it out of guilt. Some of it because I genuinely believed helping occasionally was what decent sons did. But mostly because I had been trained my whole life to confuse love with usefulness. Even when I moved into my own townhouse across the city, it didn't stop. If anything, distance made them bolder. My success became proof in their minds that I could afford to be generous. And Grandpa saw it long before I did. He was my father's father, 83, sharp-eyed, formal, old school in a way that made people sit straighter when he entered a room. He had built a small but valuable property portfolio over 40 years, a few rental units, some conservative investments, the family home he still lived in, and enough savings that everyone in the family circled him in quiet anticipation. Lena treated every visit to Grandpa like an audition. Mom suddenly became attentive whenever his health came up. Dad, who had spent years arguing with him about everything from politics to gutters, transformed into the world's most patient son whenever wills were mentioned. Me? I just visited him because he was the only person in the family who ever talked to me like I was a person instead of a resource. He liked hearing about my work, even though he barely understood it. "So, you catch thieves before they break in?" he once asked, squinting over his tea. "Something like that," I said. He nodded, impressed. "Useful. Better than half the consultants your sister talks about." That was Grandpa. Dry, blunt, impossible not to love. About 6 months before everything exploded, he invited me to lunch at his house. Not unusual. But there was a different tone to him that day. He asked odd questions. Had I ever given my parents access to my personal documents? Did they know my account details? Did I trust Lena with anything involving money? I laughed at the last one. No one trusts Lena with money. He didn't laugh back. "Good," he said. "Keep it that way." Then he changed the subject. I should have asked more. I didn't. That was my mistake. A month later, Mom called asking if I could come by on Sunday, because there's something we want to discuss as a family. That phrase alone should have sent me running. I arrived to find Lena already there, barefoot on one of the dining room chairs, sipping wine like she paid for the place. Mom had made pot roast, which meant manipulation was on the menu. Dad sat at the head of the table, solemn in a way that suggested he was about to present something he had already decided for everyone else. "We've been talking," he began. That never meant anything good. Mom took over. "Your grandfather is getting older, Otto. We need to think about the future, about preserving assets, making smart family decisions." Lena gave me this thin little smile. Not everyone is good with money in the same way. I actually laughed. "You cannot be serious." Dad's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone." My tone? I looked at Lena. She has declared bankruptcy, spiritually at least 4 times. She took risks, Mom snapped. At least she had the courage to try. There it was, the family religion. Lena's recklessness was courage. My caution was selfishness. Dad pushed a folder toward me. "We think it would be wise, when the time comes, for certain family assets to be managed centrally." By centrally, I said, "You mean by you." He didn't deny it. Inside the folder were printed pages with notes, rough diagrams of what they called a distribution plan. It was amateurish, presumptuous, and infuriating. They had already mentally divided Grandpa's estate like vultures marking bone. One line caught my attention. "Kitchen Renovation Fund. Temporary advance against future family allocation." I looked up slowly. Mom smiled, like this was all reasonable. "If we improve the house now, it increases value for everyone." "Who's everyone?" Dad leaned back. "The family." I closed the folder. "You're discussing spending money that isn't yours from an inheritance that hasn't even happened." Lena rolled her eyes. "God, Otto, it's called planning." "No," I said. "It's called counting someone else's money while he's still alive." For once, the room fell silent. Dad's face hardened. "Your grandfather wants this family stable. He knows that." I stood up. "Then he can say it himself." I left before dinner with my mother calling after me that I was being dramatic. For the next few weeks, things went cold. Fewer calls, sharper texts, passive-aggressive comments in the family group chat. Lena posted quotes online about people who hoard resources and call it boundaries. Then came the renovation. At first, it was just photos Mom posted online. Cabinet samples, tile mock-ups, big changes coming. I figured maybe they had taken out a loan they couldn't afford, which was still stupid, but at least it was their stupidity. Then Grandpa called me at 9:14 p.m. on a Thursday. That alone made my stomach drop. He never called late. When I answered, I immediately heard another voice in the room. Male, calm, professional. "Otto," Grandpa said. "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Good. I have Mr. Feldman here with me. Lawyer, of course." My grip tightened on the phone. "What happened?" There was a pause, the kind that changes your heartbeat before the words even arrive. Your father came by today with paperwork, Grandpa said. He implied you were aware of it. I stood up from my desk so fast my chair rolled backward. What paperwork? Authorization forms? Amendments? A property-related declaration? Messy stuff, full of urgency and family language. He said it would simplify things for everyone. I closed my eyes. I had no idea. I know, Grandpa said. That's why I didn't sign. Mr. Feldman came on the line then. His voice was clipped and precise. Otto, I cannot disclose every legal detail until tomorrow in person, but I believe you should know this much. There appears to have been an attempt to represent future distribution of certain assets as if already agreed upon by beneficiaries. Your father made statements suggesting shared family consent. We have reason to believe funds may already have been committed based on those assumptions. I felt cold all over. Committed? How? Grandpa took the phone back. Your mother told me your kitchen looked lovely in the photos she sent, he said. I asked her how they paid for it. She said, and I quote, "We finally used what was coming to us anyway." For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I said, very quietly, "They told contractors they already had the inheritance." Seems so, Grandpa replied. And perhaps more than that. Mr. Feldman returned to the line. Be at your parents' house tomorrow morning at 9. Do not warn them. Why? Because, he said, your grandfather has decided to settle the matter formally. I'd barely slept. At 7 a.m., Mom texted me, come by for coffee if you want to see the finished backsplash. It's stunning. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, sure. When I got there, Dad was in an excellent mood. That should have scared him more than it reassured him. My parents only relaxed like that when they believed the outcome was guaranteed. The kitchen looked exactly like the sort of room people build when they want the world to think they've made it. White oak cabinets, imported stone, designer lighting, a 6-burner range none of them would ever use properly, because my mother's culinary talent peaked at overcooked chicken. Mom saw me looking and beamed. Well, she asked, worth the investment, right? I set my keys on the counter. It's expensive. Dad snorted. Quality is expensive. Lena walked in a few minutes later, dressed like she was attending a brunch where she planned to be admired. She air-kissed Mom, nodded at me, and immediately began talking about how the kitchen would be perfect for hosting clients once she launched her next venture. Content dinners, she said. Intimate brand events. There's so much potential. Dad laughed. See? This house is an asset. Then he turned to me, enjoying himself. We spent your inheritance on the kitchen renovation. You would have wasted it anyway. Mom gave me that practiced, patient expression she used when explaining something to a child. Honestly, Otto, what would you have done? Invested it? Let it sit. At least this benefits the family now. I nodded once. Okay, I said. Lena blinked, clearly disappointed. Dad smirked. He mistook my calm for surrender. At exactly 9:03, we heard a car pull into the driveway. Dad frowned. You expecting someone? I looked toward the front window. Probably. The black sedan stopped by the curb. Another car followed behind it, a dark gray SUV. Mom's face changed first. Who is that? My answer came as the doorbell rang. Dad opened it with the irritated confidence of a man unaccustomed to consequences. On the porch stood Grandpa, straight-backed despite his cane, in a charcoal overcoat. Beside him was Mr. Feldman, carrying a leather briefcase. Behind them were a woman in a navy suit with a clipboard and a broad-shouldered man I didn't know at the time, but later learned was an investigator from the estate firm. For the first time in years, I saw my father look uncertain. Dad, he said, forcing a smile. What's all this? Grandpa walked past him without waiting for permission. What it is, he said, entering the kitchen and looking around slowly, is ugly. Nobody spoke. He turned in a full circle, taking in the counters, the fixtures, the smugness still hanging in the room like perfume. Then he tapped the island with 2 fingers. You spent money you did not have, he said, based on property and distributions that were never yours. You presumed, you implied. And unless I've been badly misinformed, you may also have misrepresented matters to a contractor and a lender. Dad recovered enough to scoff. Now hold on. Nobody did anything improper. Mr. Feldman opened his briefcase. Let's not use words we may regret, Mr. Weber. Mom jumped in, voice trembling. This is ridiculous. We're family. No, Grandpa said, looking directly at her. Family does not forge certainty out of greed. Lena stepped back from the counter. Forge? What are you even accusing us of? The woman with the clipboard spoke for the first time. We're here to document the current state of the property and review agreements connected to pending claims. Dad stared. Claims? I watched the color drain from his face in stages. Mr. Feldman laid out papers on the island my inheritance had apparently purchased. Your father, he said to me, though loud enough for everyone, contacted our office yesterday because he had reason to suspect pressure was being applied regarding future estate allocations. During review, we uncovered communications, contractor representations, and financial commitments referencing anticipated inheritance as if vested and authorized. It is not. Dad jabbed a finger at me. You brought them here? I was invited, I said. Mom's eyes widened. Otto. No, Grandpa snapped. You don't get to say his name like he did something wrong. That shut her up. Mr. Feldman continued. Effective immediately. All prior informal assumptions regarding inheritance are void, and since there appears to have been attempted reliance on non-existent beneficiary approval, my client has executed a revised estate structure. Dad actually laughed then, but it sounded thin. A revised. What does that even mean? Grandpa looked at me, and there was something almost sorrowful in his face. It means, he said, I got tired of watching jackals circle my life before I was done living it. Lena folded her arms. That's dramatic. Grandpa ignored her. I have placed the majority of my estate into a managed trust. Silence. Dad stared. Managed by who? By professionals, Grandpa said. Not by blood, not by whiners, not by gamblers in linen trousers. That last part was aimed at Lena, who flushed instantly. Mom found her voice. This is because Otto poisoned you against us. I laughed then. I couldn't help it. One sharp, disbelieving laugh. Poisoned him? You used my inheritance in conversation like it was already withdrawn cash. Dad pounded a hand on the counter. We were improving the house. With whose authority? I asked. With family authority, he snapped. Grandpa's cane hit the floor once, hard. There is no such thing as family authority over my estate while I am breathing. The investigator stepped forward and handed Mr. Feldman a file. He opened it. There is also the matter, he said coolly, of the application made 3 weeks ago for a renovation credit extension. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at Mom. That was all I needed to know. Mr. Feldman continued. The application included supporting language referencing anticipated inheritance access and implied post-distribution reimbursement capacity. Grandpa's voice turned lethal. You leveraged my death for backsplash tile. Nobody moved. Then Lena said, in that wounded, spoiled tone she had perfected since childhood, this is insane. It's just a kitchen. Grandpa looked at her with such disappointment that even she flinched. No, he said. It is not just a kitchen. It is proof. Proof that all of you were willing to spend what you had not earned because you believed I would die on schedule. Mom started crying then, but not from guilt, from fear. Walter, please, she whispered. You're overreacting. Grandpa straightened. Am I? He turned to me. Otto, tell them what you never asked me for. I frowned. What? In 20 years, he said. Tell them what you have never once asked me for. I understood. Money, I said. I never asked you for money. Grandpa nodded. Then he looked at the others, one by one. Your son visited me because he wanted to see me. The rest of you visited me like interns monitoring a retirement account. Dad stepped forward. This is absurd. Otto has always acted superior because he works in tech and hoards cash and pays for your emergencies. I cut in. That landed. I kept going. The property taxes, the truck repair, Lena's rent, the $3,000 for her consulting certification, the dental bill you said insurance delayed, the money for the roof. Mom whispered, "You didn't have to keep score." "No," I said. "I had to, because none of you ever did." Lena scoffed. "Oh my God, you're acting like a martyr." I turned to her. "You said last year that I'm lucky my job lets me sit in a chair all day while real creatives struggle. Then you asked me to cover your utilities." She opened her mouth, but Grandpa lifted a hand. "Enough, Mr. Feldman slid one final page across the island. "This document notifies you that future distributions from the trust will be conditional and controlled. Specific gifts previously considered for family members have been removed. A charitable allocation has been added. A direct personal bequest to Otto remains intact and separately protected." Dad's head snapped up. "What bequest?" I looked at Grandpa. He gave me the slightest nod. Mr. Feldman answered, "A private transfer designated to Mr. Otto Weber outside the contested assumptions you appear to have built this renovation around." Mom went pale. "How much?" Grandpa replied, before the lawyer could. "Enough." That word shattered them more than any number would have. Dad's face changed from anger to something uglier, panic mixed with entitlement. "You can't do this," he said. "We're your family." Grandpa's expression hardened. So was my late wife. She taught me the difference between family and dependence. Then he turned toward the door, suddenly looking older. "I am not dead," he said. "But if any of you insist on treating my life like a countdown clock, you will find yourselves written out of the alarm." He walked out slowly, with Mr. Feldman beside him. The woman with the clipboard and the investigator followed. And just like that, the kitchen no longer looked triumphant. It looked haunted. The moment the door shut, Dad exploded. "You did this." He was shouting at me now, red-faced, spitting fury. "You went behind our backs. You manipulated him. You turned him against us because you were jealous." "Jealous of what?" I asked quietly. "Fraud with under-cabinet lighting." Mom was crying harder now, but I could already tell where this was going. "Not remorse. Strategy." "Otto, sweetheart, listen," she said, stepping toward me. "We were thinking of everyone. We assumed—" "That's the problem," I said. "You assumed my grandfather's death was a budgeting tool." Lena slammed her wine glass into the sink. "This whole family is obsessed with money because of you. You always make everything transactional." I stared at her. "You literally build your life by sending invoices to other people's boundaries." She swore at me. "Dad told me to get out. Mom begged me not to abandon the family in a misunderstanding." I left without another word. By noon, my phone was a war zone. "Dad, call me now. Mom, we can fix this. Lena, you are sick. Grandpa's confused, and you exploited that." I didn't respond. At 2 p.m., Grandpa called. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes. Liar." That made me smile for the first time all day. "I'm angry," I admitted. "You should be," he said. "But don't confuse anger with obligation." I leaned back in my chair. "What happens now? What should have happened sooner?" He said. "Consequences." And consequences came fast. The renovation lender, once the estate references were challenged, reevaluated everything. The favorable terms vanished. The contractor, learning he had been reassured with statements about incoming inheritance-backed repayment, got nervous and aggressive. Payments accelerated. Legal notices started arriving. Dad called me 3 days later, voice stripped of pride. "We need to talk." "No. This affects the whole family." "Good. Otto, don't do this." I almost laughed. He still thought I was the one doing something to them, as if gravity were a personal attack, when you're the one who stepped off the roof. Then Mom started showing up at my townhouse. The first time, she brought banana bread and tears. "I know your father handled things badly," she said, from my porch, "but he was under pressure." I folded my arms. "Pressure to install imported tile. Don't be cruel." Cruel is spending money tied to someone else's death and calling it practical. She cried, said families make mistakes, said I was her son, said she didn't want this rift to define us. I asked one question. If Grandpa hadn't found out, would you have told me? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I didn't invite her in. Lena tried a different approach. She texted me a long rant about how the system always favored emotionally unavailable men with conventional jobs. and how I'd weaponized Grandpa's affection because I needed control. I blocked her number halfway through paragraph 3. Dad held out the longest. Pride is stubborn in men who think authority is a birthright. But when the bills mounted and Grandpa stopped taking his calls, pride gave way to desperation. 2 weeks after the kitchen confrontation, he showed up at my office building downtown. Not my actual office, I worked hybrid, but he knew I sometimes took meetings there. He was sitting in the lobby when I came down. He looked tired. Older, smaller somehow. For one reckless second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then he stood and said, without apology, "You need to speak to your grandfather." There it was. Not please, not I was wrong. Just another assignment. "I don't need to do anything," I said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You know this isn't fair." I actually laughed. "Fair? You know I've put everything into this family." "No," I said. "You put everything into maintaining control. There's a difference." He clenched his jaw. "I am your father, and you treated me like an account with a pulse." That hit him. I saw it. He tried once more. "Look, maybe we misjudged. Maybe we moved too quickly. But this can still be fixed." There was something almost pathetic in hearing him say "we" when he meant you can fix the mess we made. I shook my head. "No. What can happen now is different. You can live with what you chose." Then I walked away. Months passed. The house didn't get sold, but parts of the renovation dream curdled. They had to refinance at worse terms. Lena moved back in after another business attempt collapsed. Mom stopped posting kitchen photos. Dad's messages got shorter, less commanding, more brittle. Meanwhile, something strange happened to me. I got lighter. Not immediately. At first, there was guilt. Old, trained, invasive guilt. The kind installed in childhood. The kind that tells you boundaries are violence and self-protection is betrayal. But every week, I didn't send money. Every weekend, I didn't sit through some manipulative dinner. Every time I ignored a text designed to pull me back into orbit, I could breathe a little better. I started sleeping through the night. I took a trip to Portland just because I wanted to. I bought a better desk for my home office. I started seeing a woman named Mara, an architect with a dry laugh and no patience for emotional blackmail. On our 4th date, I told her a cleaner version of the family drama. She listened, then said, "So they trained you to confuse being needed with being loved." I stared at her. "That's annoyingly accurate." She smiled. "I'm very good at my job." It was the first time someone had maimed it so plainly. Grandpa and I got closer after that. I visited him every Sunday. Sometimes we talked about the estate. Mostly we didn't. Mostly we played chess, drank tea, and insulted each other's opening moves. One rainy afternoon, he looked at me over the board and said, "You know the worst part?" "What?" "I don't care that they wanted money. Lots of people want money. I care that they thought I was already gone while looking me in the eye." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. That part got me too. He made one final change to the trust that winter. He didn't tell me details at first, just said, "I've adjusted expectations." I found out later, through Mr. Feldman, that Grandpa had created a scholarship fund for trade students and first-generation college kids in Grandma's name. He said if his family wanted to live off his legacy, he'd rather strangers build futures from it. It was exactly the kind of elegant revenge only Grandpa could produce. A month after that, Mom sent me a photo. At first I thought it was accidental. Just a picture of the kitchen island, cluttered with unpaid notices, a half-dead orchid, and a fruit bowl with nothing in it but lemons. Then the message came. "I miss when this felt like a home." I looked at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "Homes aren't built from stolen expectations." I didn't send anything else. Grandpa is still alive now. Still sharp. Still impossible. Still doing everything with a lawyer present. Dad rarely calls him anymore. Lena tells people the family went through a complicated inheritance dispute, which is a nice way of saying greed got exposed in natural light. Mom still tries to speak to me on birthdays and holidays. Always careful now. Always softer, as if tone alone can rebuild trust. Maybe one day I'll forgive some of it. But forgiveness is not access, and love is not a line of credit. That was the lesson, not the kitchen, not the legal papers. Not even the black sedan pulling into the driveway like judgment with polished rims. The lesson was simpler. The people who are most offended when you stop funding their comfort were never protecting your heart. They were protecting your function. For years, my family saw me as the safe son, the stable one, the one who would nod, pay, absorb, excuse, and stay. And I did nod that morning in the kitchen. Dad thought it meant surrender. What it really meant was this: I already knew. And for the first time in my life, I was done being the last person informed about my own worth.